Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Supplier Side podcast. I'm Homayune and Ghaussi, a partner at Warner Norcross and part of the Automotive Group and chair of the Supply Chain Industry Group. And with me today is my partner, Ashley Racette. Ashley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, Ashley Racette, also a member of our Automotive Industry Group and Supply Chain Practice Group. We are here today to talk about cross-border disputes and why is that such a pressing issue that you've encountered recently?
Well, you and I have encountered it quite a bit in the past few months, and often we do. And it's, and I think what is key in that issue is understanding what cross-border means, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of people think cross-border and they think long international flights or long international shipments, et cetera, but cross-border can mean a lot more than that,
Yeah, it can. For example, sort of near and dear to our hearts as Michiganders, Ohio
right?
is a cross-border dispute,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and cross-border, anytime you have a supply chain that is involves more than two states, it's cross-border. Anytime you have more than one country, it's cross-border. And when you have that, there are a few issues you need to consider when you go into it that could affect your supply chain at the end if there are disputes.
And you talked about how we've encountered some unique
Right.
cross-border disputes recently. What are broadly some of the issues that suppliers have to be looking out for when they are dealing with either a supplier or a customer that
Right.
is across a state or international border?
Yeah. Well, and one of the main things that we've dealt with in the past year is tariffs, things that can come into effect when you're crossing borders that could affect your cost of supply, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can significantly change what you expected for your supply from the start to when you're actually supplying the product. And then, other than that, there are a lot of issues related to enforcement, right? You and I have dealt with enforcement recently,
Yeah, we have. And I was thinking, um, you know, from our recent experience, the issues that have come up are okay, we have the right choice of law, we have the right court, we've
right?
got the order.
Right.
How do we enforce that order in another state or another country?
Right. I think what people need to consider is when you enter into a contract and you choose your law, you choose your jurisdiction, you choose all of that, and you're able to get your jurisdiction of choice. So you're happy about that. You get your choice of laws, so you're happy with that. But when it comes to enforcement and you have a dispute, what people need to understand is you can have a court sitting 2 miles from the Ohio border, and what can it do in Ohio?
Right?
Right.
Practically speaking, you do all the right things, you have your order, but it's just not enforceable in another state.
Right.
And there are a lot of nuances to why that is the case.
Yeah.
But that's the value of looking at your contract before you go and get the court
Right.
order and
Right.
figuring out how do I make that supplier or that customer do the thing
Yeah.
we're trying to make them do.
Right.
And there are also timing considerations, right?
Yeah.
More so with the international borders.
Right. Yeah, and that gets to what you just mentioned about enforcing court orders. Court orders are pieces of paper until they're enforced.
Hmm.
More often than not, people comply with court orders, but if you're forced to seek enforcement, what that court can do to enforce is limited to its borders. And there are ways to enforce that order in another state, in another country, but then the timing issue comes into play, right?
Right. I mean, we have a recent example where an order was obtained in a foreign jurisdiction
Right.
and nothing.
Yeah.
It was ultimately irrelevant because that customer could not take the steps needed in the foreign jurisdiction to make it more than a piece of paper, as you
Right.
said.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even when you can take those steps, it takes much longer. And usually when you need these orders, you can't wait that long. It's a matter of hours and days that you need something enforced, not weeks and months. And you even get into situations of, having to serve another company through the Hague Convention or otherwise, which can take, the last time I did it was over 6 months.
Yep. Same here.
Yeah.
And that's smooth sailing.
Yeah. Right.
Um, Kind of dovetailing from that, choice of law is critical
Right.
when we encounter these issues, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So you and I, we're litigators. We go to court. We enforce things, but we also advise clients on contracts. And when it comes to choice of law, you have to think of what that law means to the key parts of your contract. And even in the US, between states, there are nuances, right?
Absolutely. And we, when we're advising on choice of law, we like to recommend jurisdictions where they deal with automotive supply disputes
Right.
routinely. And we
Right.
know the judges have a degree of familiarity.
Right.
And also with the UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code,
Right.
which governs supply chain disputes, because lacking that familiarity can impact
Right.
your case.
Yeah. And the UCC, it is a uniform commercial code. It's applicable throughout the United States. But states have nuances of how the courts have interpreted the UCC and how they enforce the UCC. And you need to understand that when you choose your applicable law. You don't want to choose a state where the UCC, there isn't much transactions under the UCC, so there isn't much case law, so there isn't much interpretation. And then you'll be forced, which can be a positive at times. I've been in states where there hasn't been law, and then I've been able to tell the courts, well, it's the UCC, and you should listen to Michigan law, which does have this, and it's helpful here. But it can also be hurtful in the sense that you're going to get a judge who hasn't heard of the UCC since they went to law school.
Right. It becomes sort of an educational endeavor,
Right.
which isn't what you're
Right.
looking to do when you are moving at warp speed
Right.
to get an emergency order to
Right.
compel someone to continue supply.
Exactly.
And there are countervailing reasons to select various, choices of law.
Right.
But this is one issue that is worth putting in, the calculus of where do we want
Right.
our disputes decided and what law do we want to apply. And I've sort of hinted at where I'm going to go next, which is where do we want
Yeah.
our cases to be decided and
Right.
how critical is jurisdiction for issues like this?
Yeah. And obviously the first choice is I want to be in my own backyard, right?
Right.
I mean, that's everyone wants to be in their own backyard. You have your lawyers that you work with all the time. You know the courts. They know the courts. You don't have to hire lawyers in other states. All those things are helpful. But you have to think about enforcement when you think of jurisdiction. And if you limit yourself to jurisdiction, what happens?
Right. Well, and that is really where the state court, federal court distinction becomes important.
Right.
And there are, by state court, we mean state of Michigan, state of Ohio, et cetera.
Right.
Federal court is the federal regime, also located within each state. The great thing about federal courts is when they issue an order, they have nationwide enforcement.
Right.
So you can get that order in Michigan and enforce it in Ohio.
Right.
The same is not true for a state court, though, right?
Right. Yep. Yeah. And when you choose a jurisdiction, it's important to consider, are you choosing that jurisdiction as an option or are you choosing that jurisdiction as the exclusive option? Are you tying yourself to that jurisdiction? Because if you tie yourself to that jurisdiction and your supply moves around, you could have problems with having to go to that court when you want to go to a different court.
That's a great point. And that's why we sometimes advise on, or at least see provisions that have an exclusive jurisdiction with a carve out for that emergency scenario that we've been talking about. And related to that, it's rare, but there are some contracts that have an arbitration provision.
Right.
And what do you do then when you need an emergency order?
Right. Yeah. That's why it's always important to have that carve out. Even if you choose arbitration as your means of resolving disputes with your supplier, with your customer, have a carve out for emergencies, because emergencies do arise. And even though arbitration rules, American arbitration rules, JAM arbitration rules, do allow for certain emergency motions, they're again enforcement questions as to whether an arbitration order can be enforced and how it's enforced through the court. Right.
Right. And something I was thinking about as I was, preparing today was we sort of look at the question of, cross-border issues defensively. Like,
Right.
what do I need to do defensively to
Right.
prepare to enforce that order? But just as true is using those tactics offensively, and we've done that recently.
Yeah, exactly. To prevent someone from getting the order that they need by, enforcing the what you have in your provisions and making them go through what you agreed to in the provisions. And that's why, I always tell clients when it comes to the contracting side of it, we're litigators. We handle cases that, from filing the complaint to the end conclusion, whether it's settlement, trial, judgment, can be years. And I tell clients, spend a little time with me at the beginning, making sure your contract is in order, and it could prevent you from spending years with me at the end.
Yes.
Right.
And this is a line I have stolen from Homayune because it's
Yeah.
just true.
Right.
And it can be overlooked.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna overdo it.
Right.
Give us a call.
Yeah.
Let's talk through the issue that you see with respect to potentially cross-border within the U.S. or outside of it, and game plan.
Yeah.
The best case scenario is to be proactive.
Right.
We're here if you're reactive as well, but
Yeah.
if we can do it when the supplier dispute arises,
Right.
then we can identify the issue or the benefit,
Yeah.
and plan for that.
Yeah, and
proactively.
let the lawyers figure that out, because it's, when you're about to enter into a relationship, both sides are happy. Like a marriage, you don't want to think about the end, but your contracts are your prenup agreements essentially. So think about it. Let the lawyers think about how things could fall apart so that you can be protected walking into it.
Right. I mean, understandably, when these things are being negotiated, the focus is dollars and cents,
Yeah.
volume, large scale issues. It's
Right.
not necessarily
Yeah.
where we're going to go to court in
Yeah.
this, what seems to be a small likelihood possibility.
Yeah.
But like I said, there's a solution to every problem. So
Right. And in all the cases we handle, how often do we have supplier and customer in Michigan? It's rare, right? So
Very.
you're going to have cross-border, some aspect cross-border in your supply chain, and it's important to think about it at the outset.
Right, especially now, and I am, given the status of trade relations, that it's only going to continue.
Right.
That we have more and more international,
Yeah.
cross-border matters arising.
Yeah.
Well, I think that is the conclusion of what we plan to talk about
Yeah.
today. Thank you for your insights.
And yours.
As
Yeah.
always. And again, this is the Supplier Side podcast, Warner's Automotive Supply Chain podcast. We're excited that we had the chance to speak to you today. Thank you for listening. And we look forward to our colleagues, doing the next series in this podcast. Thank you very much.